name is Patel. I'm a full-time emergency management physician. I work here in Houston, Texas. I'm an assistant professor at the Baylor College of Medicine, and I do full-time locums work through a locums practice across several states. I'm really excited to do this talk today, like we do kind of every month or so, about locums and about how you can pursue your passions outside of medicine within the locums model. Locumstory.com is an educational website with lots of blogs, lots of videos, and lots of information to help facilitate that if it's something you want to pursue in your career. Before we introduce our two panelists today, a few housekeeping items as usual. One is that you can't be seen or heard, I'm sorry. But you will have the ability to ask questions. There will be a Q&A session on the bottom, so you can just submit your question. We'll take a look at it. We have two moderators that will be fielding all the talks, and they will kind of throw in the questions as needed. If you're having any technical problems, just log in, log back out, and remember that we're recording this, and so you can always come back and take a look at it on the website or share it with somebody who might be interested in it as well. So that should pretty much be it. We have two really interesting and cool speakers today. We have Dr. Colin Zhu and Dr. Andrew Wilner. You may be familiar with their podcast. They both do kind of individual things within medicine. Dr. Zhu's very much into cooking. He has TheChefDoc. Dr. Wilner has written books and done millions of other things. I'm sure he'll be happy to talk about them. Dr. Wilner, do you want to start out and give yourself an introduction for us? Dr. Wilner, I think your audio is off, so you may have to get the audio back on.
Well, sure. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me to talk about locums. It's always fun. You know, I started my medical career in a traditional job. You know, I joined a group practice and I worked there for 8 years, and I was, by all accounts, very successful. But I had a lot of other interests, and travel and writing and scuba diving. And, you know, as everybody who's in private practice knows, it's fairly consuming. So my first thought was to go into academics, you know, where I could balance a little bit, not quite so intense. And I tried that. It was a disaster. It didn't work. And I left that position and found myself unemployed. And I started looking for things to do. I worked as a medical journalist, and then I discovered locums. So locums allowed me to practice medicine on my own terms and give me time. It was completely up to me if I wanted to work 6 months a year. I usually worked 3 months and then traveled 3 months, and worked 3 months and traveled 3 months. But knowing that I was the one who decided, rather than, you know, applying for vacation time in my private practice, you know, 6 months from now, I need 2 weeks off, and it was a big deal. Now it's just up to me, just a matter of managing the finances. And gee, which season is the best to go to the Philippines when it's not raining too much? So now it's been a long story, but I'm an associate professor of neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, Tennessee. And I still have a locums position at the Veterans Hospital. I did my internship way back when at a VA, and I kind of like the VA. So I still have a locums job at the VA. And things working out pretty well.
Wonderful. Do you want to give us a quick information about that background?
Well, let's see. I don't know where you wanted to start. So Yale University undergrad in biology, my first love, which led to lifelong scuba diving. I have an underwater channel. It's called Underwater with Dr. Andrew on YouTube, and I do mini documentaries, mostly sea life from the South Pacific. I've made a couple underwater movies that have won awards. And whenever I can, there's been a lull. You know, you may have heard there was a pandemic, kind of slowed down the travel thing. But I'm really looking forward to maybe a year from now getting some more underwater footage. Also very interested in writing. Ever since I was a teenager, I've written 4 books now. And the last one, not surprisingly, was a guide for locums. It's called The Locum Life, because I just sort of fell into locums. It's like, gee, there's locums. What's that? And I realized it's an incredible tool for physicians For residents just starting out, gee, I'm not ready for my first job. I'm not sure where I want to live. And you can kind of test out geographic areas, California, Hawaii, New York, what do I want? And test out practice styles. Do I want a little clinic? Do I want the Geisinger clinic? What is it that I want? So without making a formal commitment, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And I think what I enjoyed about locums, there's no expectation that you will continue beyond your contract.
Right.
Even when you join a group, okay, it's a 1 year contract, 2 years, you may become a partner. There's this expectation that you're going to continue. But with locums, you have a defined time. And if you do well, they may ask you to stay on. But if you don't, no hard feelings, you move on to your next thing. Yeah. Locums for midlife career, a lot of midlife docs need extra money. Work during your vacation time, weekends. You don't have to sacrifice. You don't have to stop your regular job. As long as you work outside of your, non-compete area, which with locums is getting easier and easier with, multi-state agreements and so on. You have to be licensed in the state that you go to, or you may have a neighboring state. I worked for a long time in Massachusetts, but I lived in Rhode Island, it's like they have different names and they have different cultures, but they're pretty close together. I worked in Connecticut too. So at one point I had licenses in all three. And then you have the pre-retirement phase where a lot of docs my age, don't want to be working 60 hours a week, but they don't want to stop. And it's an in-between area. And one of the things that's great about locums that no one talks about, so I'm going to throw this out there, is there's no ageism. When you get to be my age, even if you're a perfect candidate, there's a little hesitancy. It may not be spoken, but gee, are we going to hire this guy? How long is he going to last? How long is he going to be productive? But from a locums point of view, they just want you to last till the end of your contract. And they know that you're experienced, right? You know what you're doing. It's like, this is great. We're going to get this guy. He's been around. He knows what he's doing. He's exactly what we want. So locums can be attractive, at different stages all throughout your career.
Wonderful. Well, let me let Dr. Z jump in here. You want to introduce yourself as well and kind of about what you do with cooking and as well kind of how you got into locums?
Yeah, definitely. So I appreciate Rip for hosting, Dr. Wilner, good to see you again, and for the Locumstory staff for inviting me to come on. So I really appreciate it. And everyone that's listening. So my name is Dr. Colin Zhu. I'm basically a board certified family practitioner. I'm also a board certified in lifestyle medicine. I'm very, very similar. Dr. Wilner's a story, I hear a lot of parallels, with, his story. And then, I actually started locums right out, from the gate. Similarly, I said to myself, I didn't know what kind of doctor, not in terms of specialty, but in terms of, what was going to be my professional persona? How was I going to practice? What kind of style of medicine do I want to, portray out there, and, unlike most people, I didn't really have major obligations. I didn't have a family to take care of. I didn't have, a gigantic mortgage or anything like that. So I first heard about locums during my second year of being a resident. And it was one of my mentors. She did locums for 2 years before she ended up building a practice in Manhattan, New York City. And so I said to myself, what is that? And so I jumped all in because it wasn't attractive at the time for me to, be part of a group practice or a hospital system. And so similarly, like Dr. Wilner was saying, I just kind of wanted to get out there. I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm based in LA right now. And I just said to myself, I'm not a cold person. So I'm either going to go west or going to go south. And so that's exactly what I did. Over the span of 4 years, I practiced in 4 different states, and I practiced in the VA, I practiced in Indian health, tribal health. I practice in community health, county medicine, underserved Latino communities. And that really allowed me to find what it is, what work and life balance. I think that's kind of, unique to everyone's preference. And so that allows me a lot more flexibility, freedom to just practice however I wanted to practice, similarly, not having an expectation of going beyond that contract, like Dr. Wilner was saying. And I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I learned immensely. I think what was missing, because I did mainly just locums, I think what was missing was that foundation of going back to a work home base. And, I was changing jobs every 6 months, and then I was going on vacation for like a month or two afterwards. And so it got to a point where I think the only downside that I got from it was saying goodbye to the people that you formed a really good rapport and relationship with, with the, health staff workers, with the, the work environment there. And, you just really develop really good friendships. And I still get calls from people from my first job assignment, probably 5 years ago now, 6 years ago now. So it's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of how I started out as well. I think I started, just like Dr. Wilner was saying, trying to do more work abroad and more community type work. And we have global health department. And I think I found it very challenging being an academic, doing a community job, and also trying to balance doing my passion stuff abroad, which was very challenging, getting even a week or 2 weeks off total, which doesn't really make it worth it going abroad somewhere. And I think in the end, I left my community job and started jumping into a little bit of locums, and then found it was such a viable model to sort of carve out what I wanted to do first and then build my work schedule around that, which I think works so well for EM, for family, for a lot of different specialties. And it really helps you kind of recenter on what you're interested in outside of medicine or even within medicine and ways to actually achieve that. I tell people a lot as well. I think emergency has gone very corporate. Some people like that environment, some people don't. I think a lot of physicians, if you talk about burnout, involves that aspect of feeling disconnected, part of a big machine where you don't really feel important. But I feel like when I do locum, and I still do full-time locums, I'm on the road about 4 days a week, working in a couple other states. But I feel that there's an immense gratitude and appreciation that you're bringing your skill set to a rural area where, like you were saying, obviously you have these great relationships with people that are really grateful for what brought you there. So do you guys both maybe want to talk about how you balance your outside interests? I know Dr. Wilner, you're talking about your writing, your journalism, and kind of how you do that with your clinical practice. Dr. Wilner, you want to start first?
It's a battle every day, right? I think when you have a passion, whether it's flying your airplane or, being with your family, or you're a woodworker or a painter or a dancer, that you have to dedicate time and energy to that. And if you're a physician, you have a passion for your work. You don't want to show up for work and not know the answer to a question. You want to be familiar with the new drugs and new treatments and new side effects. So, it's an impossible goal. So you do the best you can. I think that once I realized that I didn't have to work, 80 hours a week every week, it just opened up an entire sort of new world and a new way to frame things. Physicians don't work 8 to 5 and have weekends off and Wednesday afternoon for golf. When I grew up, some doctors had that. That doesn't exist. So it's kind of up to you to set boundaries. And when I first started doing locums, I went on a long trip to Southeast Asia. And when I came back, I was just at a July 4th party chatting with someone from the Philippines who told me that they ran a medical mission group. So long story short, I became the medical director of that group for the next 10 years. And we're still going to the Philippines every year. We go to the jungle. I mean, talk about underserved communities. I mean, these are communities that don't even communicate, with the rest of the world. And it's something I never would have been able to do had I remained sort of in that private practice, very secure, very successful. group. In terms of my writing, what I discovered doing locums is that 7 on, 7 off is a common schedule now. There was no such thing when I trained. And of course, when you're on, it's 24/7. So that can be kind of exhausting for that week. But I discovered that having a block of time, a week off in between, allowed me one recovery day. So I'm tired, I'll go do errands, do the laundry, get food for the week, things that don't require a lot of high energy neurons to be firing to get accomplished. But then by Tuesday, get up early and start writing, and get in. Then I've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now all of a sudden I've got a stretch where I can be productive until I put it all in the drawer, because I'm one of those 100% people. I don't like, when I do locums, for example, I don't go to Hawaii so I can go to the beach on the weekends. I do my work for 7 days, 24/7. I'm working. I don't care where I am. Then I go home and then I'm back, and then I can do what I want, and locum stays where I left it. So I think that's the way I balance it. I try and put everything, compartmentalize, I think is the term. I try and put my work here and then my other work there. Now, I do mix it up a little bit. I have a podcast, The Art of Medicine, with Dr. Andrew Wilner, where when I find typically a physician who's doing something a little unusual, a little interesting. For example, I interviewed yesterday a physician whose job is to care for the astronauts. So that's a pretty unique subspecialty, right? I mean, astronauts are healthy, but the goal is to keep them healthy. And I visited him in Houston, and he gave me a tour. We went to the, mission control, and there's the guy in the space shuttle, and I've got some chest pain or whatever, and he's the guy who's got to figure it out. Is this important? Does he need to come back? I mean, what a great job. So, we talked about that. So I do, there's a lot of crossover. One of the reasons I love medicine, it extends into sort of all spheres of life.
I think it's great to see what other people are doing. I think we've all had those kind of moments in our career where we wonder, and I think it's healthy. I think emergency, you have great days, you have not so great days, and that doesn't mean you quit, but I think it's healthy to sometimes think about, what else could I do? I think we always, in medicine, everything is sort of given to us, meaning get to medical school, take your MCAT, go to med school, then you apply for residency, you apply for fellowship, now here's your job. And I think it's hard for physicians to deviate from that and think about other things they could do if they have an interest aside from just, the daily practice or joining the group or making partner or things like that. I couldn't agree more about compartmentalizing. I think I do the same thing. I work my days during the week, and then the second I get on that plane, I fire up Netflix, I'm out. I'm not thinking about it. I don't want to think about it, especially if it was a bad day and my time off. I'm on a stretch of time off right now, and I could not be happier right now because I had a long week last week. And then I like to also incorporate hobbies. When I travel, like when I was working in Missouri, we'd road trip a lot through Kansas City, around the neighboring states. The problem in Texas is you drive any direction in Texas is you're still in Texas. As other states, you can go and road trip to other places, but we like to make trips out of what we do there and make new friends. So how about you, Dr. Zhu? How do you like to kind of answer that, balancing the two together with your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the both of you in terms of, sharing your perspective. I think with mine, I would say my interest has always been creating, more wellness and creating, more happiness. And I started with the question of, how do we do this ourselves? Because, I'm a family practitioner. I do mainly outpatient, medicine, and I've always really enjoyed the concepts of, practicing what you preach and leading by example. And, it wasn't a pointed goal. It was just something that, when I came out of residency, I said to myself, what do I actually want to do? And, sometimes it takes a great amount of practice and exercising in terms of actually saying to yourself on a personal level, what does Colin Zhu want, right? And, what does he need, all the different components and steps to kind of contribute to his own life. And then, on the other side, professionally, what does Dr. Zhu want, right? And then it's, you guys talk about compartmentalizing. I don't really do that. I actually do the opposite of actually fusing the two together. And so almost, you kind of have, just the same person. And so I grew up with a, Chinese medical doctor. My mom, she practices traditional Chinese medicine. She does acupuncture. So most of my life has been around holistic wellness and prevention. And I didn't come from a long line of MDs. I was actually sharing with Dr. Andrew Wilner when he interviewed me for his book. And, so I went into that and, out of medicine, I just felt like, wow, when I went into medical school, I wanted to blend, both of them together. And then what I found out, I'm sure like a lot of our colleagues here is that, when I was following a lot of my mentors and predecessors, you see a component of chronic lifestyle related, disease risk factor in almost every disease process. And I don't know about you guys, but, I didn't receive enough nutrition or lifestyle curricula in my training in school and residency. And so I, did completely 180 where I said to myself, I need to get more involved. So what did I do? I enrolled myself into culinary school because I didn't want to learn just about nutrition. I wanted to learn about where did food come from? How do we source it? How do we combine, different elements together? And to really tackle a lot of things that we face, heart disease being the #1 killer, cancer, diabetes, obesity, those are the things that, to me are more of the silent killers, as we all know. Pandemic is obviously up front and center, but, it's like, a lot of these chronic diseases are taking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people's lives. So if I could do a little bit more, why not? And so to answer your question, I started my website, TheChefDoc, 4 years ago now. And it's basically an online blog, online resource of really educating people beyond my four walls. I really enjoy one-on-one counseling, establishing that rapport and getting to the heart of someone's story for that patient. But it was very limited. The constructs of, healthcare, as you guys know, is very limited. We can spend probably on average, like 7 minutes, per, patient. And how much of that can I really talk about? Hey, Mr. Smith, what are you doing? Are you exercising around the block? Are you enhancing your relationships? Have you, decided to, turn down that bottle? What are you eating nowadays? There's only so much we can do. And so I said to myself, I really, really got to be, really immersed in it, really, having that expertise and background. And so I decided to create this platform so other people can go to it. And when I'm not there front and center, they have resources. And so over time, I've also written, a book about thriving. I really became really obsessed with, how do we thrive as human beings, in all walks of life. And then from there, I started my podcast 2 years ago. Also on the same concepts, but also focused on mental health and also focused on plant-powered living. And then just recently over the pandemic, how do I evolve this even more? And so I created and launched a fusion of a summit and a masterclass series called the Thrive Formula. And that is, a huge 6 works labor of love. And it's basically a huge summit of over 50 speakers talking about different concepts of thriving: food as medicine, functional fitness, relationships, community, and resilience. And right now we're pending CME accreditation right now for that project.
Wonderful. I just wrote a post for Locumstory just about health and lifestyle. I love to cook. Of course, I didn't go to culinary school, but I did take a lot of cooking classes in residency just to that point, because, it's so much of health is your diet and what we put into our bodies. And I think what I was writing more about is how to maintain fitness and when you're on the road, because I think for locums, it can completely destroy you or it can make you the most healthiest ever. And I argue in that blog post that I am the most healthy when I travel, because I sit down on Sunday, meal prep for the week, bring whatever ingredients I need. Everywhere I work, I have I call it a travel suitcase I keep at the hotel or the Airbnb. It has a good cutting board, good quality knives, nonstick pan, a Ninja or a Bullet. There's very little you need to make really quick health. Now I'm also kind of plant-based vegetarian, but there's very little you actually need to make a quick 30-minute healthy meals you're going to eat 4 days a week. And then I meal prep the lunch, make the breakfast, make snacks throughout the day, have like a fit, something to keep it active, to stay healthy. And I think that's so important.
Those suitcases became very heavy over time, right?
Yeah. Well, I look back.
One time I actually mistakenly packed my chef knife into my carry-on, and the security of the TSA was like, "Sir, what is this?" And I was like, "Oh, that's not supposed to be there. So let me check this in."
I've gone through so many evolutions of that, from bringing me in Houston. They have a couple of companies with these really terrible meals, to trying to do Subway for breakfast, lunch, dinner, to trying to figure out, let me eat at the hotel. And then now why I'm at McDonald's at midnight, to finally like, this is so simple and cheap and healthy. And really, I think fun. I really believe a lot of physicians, to both of your points, have a creative side that we want to sort of express, whether it's through writing, cooking, speaking, and it's our way to do it. Well, what's Dr. Wilner, what's next for you? Do you want to talk about what's next for you, and kind of also how you balance your schedule right now and what you're doing?
Sure. So, well, I think I talked earlier about how locums is different at different stages of your life. And for most of my life, I was single. And so the only one that I kind of had to make decisions, in terms of should I do this or that was me. Well, all of that changed about 6 years ago when I got married. And when I got married for the first time, I thought, maybe we're going to have a baby. Maybe I don't, because I used to fly every week, and I'd be away for a week, come home for a week. But there's nobody at home who cared. So except the turtle, and have somebody come and feed.
Sounds like me minus the turtle.
Feed the turtle, and the turtle was pretty tolerant, never complained if I was gone too long. So when I got married, I started hunting for a new job, permanent position, which I had not had for at least 20 years. And I wasn't too enthusiastic about it either. So I took my wife with me on a number of interviews, and I continued to work locums as I hunted for a job. And I'd respond, and they'd ask me to interview, and I'd go and interview. And what happened, I interviewed in Portland, Oregon. It was a beautiful city, and the job was pretty good. They had great benefits. But there was no academic piece. I wanted a little bit, I'm clinical. Even when I was in private practice, always try and publish an academic paper once a year, go to meetings. They didn't care about that. So I scratched that job. Then there was an academic job, and I went there, and they said, well, we don't want you to do anything else outside of our employment. So when we employ you, you can't earn income from speaking or writing. You have to get permission. We want to control, because you represent us now, as a faculty member. So we want to control what your public persona. I said, well, that doesn't work for me. I don't make a lot of money with my outside activities, writing, but I make a little bit, and it's important to me. So I scratched that job. So this went on for 2 years. And because I had locums, which I was very satisfied with, I wasn't pressured into taking a position. And that was very important, because I found a position and I liked it. And then they offered me the salary, and it was too low. So it's like, well, if I hadn't had locums, I just would have taken it. It's like, well, I didn't want to lose it, because it had the 7 on, 7 off that I wanted. They were willing to tolerate my extracurricular activities. It had an academic and a clinical piece. So I went back to them and I said, this is great, but I really need more money for, to make the world go round. And they kind of, hemmed and hawed, let's go back, we'll see. And they came back with more money. So I took the job.
Yeah.
And that's where I am now. So I'm associate professor. So I'm in the middle of doing several research projects with students, which I love. And I run the inpatient service for neurology. So I see the sickest and most complex patients, which is really what I enjoy in medicine. Many of them are indigent, and disadvantaged. And that's fun. That's fun because they really need me. They really need the help. And that makes me feel like it's worth getting out of bed, It's like, I'm going to do some good today. I'm not just spinning my wheels. And then I have my week off so that I can play with my 2.5-year-old, who right now, thankfully, isn't screaming. So we can do this video without too much trouble. And my life is fairly well balanced. As I said earlier, it's a challenge every day. But next, I have a novel. So I've started working on the novel. And as soon as I get these research projects tied up and a few other things, then I want to get into a daily routine and write that. You know, novels very hard to write. I write a lot of nonfiction. If you Google me, lots of things will show up. I write for Medscape. I do hosting for ReachMD. Of course, I host my own podcast. But those things, you know, they have a beginning and an end, and you know what they are. But when you write a novel, you don't know where it's going to go. So it's a lot harder for me. It's scary. And of course, your time, you can write all day and then throw it away. You know, you might have nothing to show for all that hard work. It's not as easy to sort of say, oh yeah, I knocked that off and they're going to pay me $200 for that article and it's done. That's great. So it's a different thing, but that's really what I'd like to get back to. I've been wanting to write. I did write a novel years ago, not published. This was before self-publishing was an option. And I may revisit that, but I have some ideas. I've started something very new. And locums, I'll tell you, it's never far, you know, whenever I go to work every day, luckily almost every day is a good day. But whenever there's a bad day, it's like, well, I know who to call for a locums job. And so I don't feel boxed in. I think that's something that happens in private practices. You know, I'm stuck. I just have to keep doing what I got to put up with this. And with locums, you have a lot more, particularly now, there's way more jobs than there are physicians to fill them.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of discretion. And of course, if you're willing to travel, you've got the whole country and even international opportunities. In fact, there was an opportunity in New Zealand that I was interested in recently for a neurologist. And but I couldn't convince my wife that we should spend a year in New Zealand, you know, starting next month. I don't know why, but that wasn't an easy sell. But hopefully there'll be another opportunity.
Yeah, I think travel is important. I travel a few days a week and I come back home, and I think sometimes and I guess everybody has a different relationship with their partner, but sometimes it's nice to have a little time away. You know, sometimes it's good. You know, when I'm about to go, I feel like my bags are packed and she's like, "Are you ready to go now?" I'm like, No, I have one more day here. I'm not flying out till tomorrow. You know, we can tolerate each other for one more day before I actually leave. That's great. How about you, Dr. Zhu?
I think, what was the original question?
Yeah,
what are we continuing?
How you're balancing things now, what you have kind of going on next?
Yeah, so for me, you know, I'm, you know, similarly to the rest of the world, you know, when the pandemic hit, you know, depending on your situation and context, you know, you're thinking about how to pivot and how to navigate, you know, through, you know, all the environments that we're doing. So I was working at a clinic before and really enjoyed it. And surprisingly, that was actually not a locums job. It became permanent. And then, you know, long story short, we had a falling out, and I just said to myself, this is the reason why I decided, you know, to really mainly just stick with locums. So prior to that, I had some experience with telemedicine, and you know, during the pandemic, now that more telemedicine has become more of the norm, I decided to really just do mostly, you know, full time while I'm balancing everything else. Traveling has gone down a little bit, similarly to, you know, the both of you. Like, I love to travel as well. I've been really humbled to really touch every continent. And you know, really talk about that. And, you know, that's become a really huge passion of mine as well. And so, you know, nowadays it's been, you know, kind of figuring out, you know, what's the next step, after, you know, as we traverse the next like 6 months to a year, in terms of traveling, domestically and internationally. So, you know, during this time, I've actually got more immersed into the podcasting, the last 6 months have been mostly dedicated to the summit that I was creating and now launched. And so looking forward, I'm actually going to be writing, my second book based off of, the summit. And, just really continuing telemedicine right now. And I've actually joined this group where, we're focusing more on plant-based and lifestyle consulting. And so, that has been, really fun. So I'll be starting that as well. So, right now is just, understanding where we're at, individually. And for me, it's important to kind of, now that we're, more apart, quote unquote, and doing more of this virtual sense, it's just connecting, continuing to reinforce those connections. So I've actually been doing a lot of food demos and talks like this, on other podcasts and conferences, and that's been very, very enjoyable for me. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, my sister is a professional writer, meaning she's an attorney turned writer. So does all these seminars where you go and you pay, I guess, a pretty hefty amount of money, and they just rip you to shreds, and then goes to the path of literary journals, trying to get published in literary journals. And she's been at it, and my God, it is very challenging. And now, actually, just like Dr. Wilner, she'd written a book, and so she's in the process of the agents and sending it to agents. And it's rough. One agent responded to her, said, "Send me one chapter. If I like it, I'll ask for more." It's I get to do a lot of writing with Locumstory, and they were I was very grateful to have the opportunity. And then that kind of led to more writing platforms as well, just about traveling, health, and fitness, and things like that. I was just going to field these two questions very quickly. For health insurance and malpractice insurance with locums, most locums are 1099s. And so that means you set up kind of your individual corporation. And so with that, you get your own health insurance, and then usually you funnel that through your S Corp, and then you get a tax write-off for that. Malpractice, usually either the hospital provides it for us, or if you're with a staffing agency, CompHealth, Weatherby, one of these guys, they will provide the malpractice for you. And I think liability issues, somebody asked as well, which is a really good question, because you're basically parachuting into other places to work. And I do it full time now. I talk a lot about how if you start at a new place, especially for emergency, number one, talk to the medical director. Number two, talk to a few physicians there. I always say number three, and I've written about this before, have a checklist. Pilots have one, surgeons have one, you should have one too, about what you are concerned about, questions about the ER or any specialty really, which will be important for you transitioning there. And then I have on my website, Mercision, www.mercisionem.com, I have something called a Suitcase Manifesto, which is basically a thing that I recommend ER docs take with them and just purchase by themselves, so that these liability issues aren't a big deal. And the two ones that are big for us are ultrasound, as well as some kind of airway device. And they're not that expensive. You get tax write-offs for them, but barring for us airway emergencies and stuff, you're pretty covered if a hospital doesn't have it. I haven't had any, I wrote another piece about locums nightmares, which was wonderful because I love film. I started out doing film actually, and it was a lot about horror movies. My sister read it and she wasn't a fan because she's a professional writer, and she's like, "You need to get people to read this." I'm like, thanks for the words of encouragement, sister. But it's just about terribles, and I haven't really had that many. Mine have been really positive experiences, and the minor things that may have been hiccuped, I talked to the staff of the hospital about. And like both of you were saying, if you have any issues at a hospital you work at, you don't have to go back. And I think that's really the best part of it, is if management changes, leadership changes, a new group, I know Dr. Zhu was saying you had a hiccup at some place, a new group takes over, you really are not obligated to go back there. And I really like that level of relationship where you can just go there and practice clinical medicine. Do you guys, Dr. Wilner or Zhu, do you guys have anything to chime in on kind of liability and things like that?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on the malpractice. I wrote 2 chapters about malpractice in my book, The Locum Life, Physician's Guide to Locum Tenens, and I learned a lot in that process. And I think it kind of goes without saying that when you take a locum's job, a position, it's because they need you, and they need you right now. So there's always a reason for that. Now, it might be kind of an innocent reason, like, you know, a physician who'd been there for 30 years retires and they're still recruiting and they need someone to replace. But it also might be that, you know, they have a lot of trouble recruiting because the hospital or ER isn't well run and doctors don't like it there and they're stuck. So I've always had in the back of my mind that I'm going into a somewhat distressed situation. And in that kind of situation, probably the risk of errors that you might just be part of because of system failures increases. So I think having the concept of malpractice in the back of your mind is important. But I think regardless of your specialty, there's two things that you can do to protect yourself from malpractice. And these are things I've learned along the way, and I highly recommend them. And they're a little bit obvious, but I think they should be stated. One is you be nice to everybody. That's one of the pleasures of locums. You're in a new situation and you can be nice to everybody. You don't have to be nice to them forever, but you're only going to be there for, you know, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You can be nice. Be nice to everybody, the patients, the staff, your colleagues, because if something does go wrong, they're going to be a lot more generous with how they feel you should be dealt with if everybody loves you versus, oh, that Dr. Patel, he is such a jerk. Of course he made an error. Whereas, oh, Dr. Patel, we love him. How could he make a mistake? And, you know, it's not his fault. So being nice is a huge protection. And the other one, which we don't say enough and which is very, very important, is be competent. It's like, know what you're doing, because there may not be anybody there to ask. And I liked your kind of idea, Dr. Patel, of bringing the equipment that you need. I mean, obviously you're going to bring your stethoscope, but if you need to use ultrasound, I carry an ophthalmoscope, for example. It's gradually becoming of historic interest, but the ophthalmoscopes in the ER never work. Mm-hmm. And when I'm doing locums, I want an ophthalmoscope that works. I bring my own. You want to be competent. You know, if you're going to be in an ER setting or an academic setting, or you're going to be I deal a lot with stroke, you know, look up the stroke guidelines before you know, on the plane when you're on your way. You know, you want to be the expert, you know, when you're there, because you may find that you're it. You know, as a neurologist, when I go, I may be the only neurologist in the hospital. There's not a whole, you know, bank of colleagues. And of course, having a Rolodex, you know, if you're my age, you know what a Rolodex is, but a Rolodex, you know, is a phone book. And of one locum's job I had, I used to call this guy at Yale. He was a headache specialist. And every now and then I'd have a difficult headache patient. I'd call him and I'd say, you know, I got this patient. What do you think? Because there was nobody in my immediate environment to talk to. And, you know, I wasn't going to be there forever. Eventually I was going to have to pass this patient on, maybe even to him. It's like, get some help. So it's good to have, you know, there was that TV program, right? You've got one phone call. So have a list of people you can call so that, you know, you get a second opinion on the spot. So you're not, you know, forced to, because medicine is vast. You're not going to know everything, but you want to try.
That's such a good point. I really like that. When I was working this last week in New Mexico, I had this patient come in and he had an ulceration in his eye like I had never seen. And thankfully, my baby cousin, who is now gone from diapers to retinal surgeon, moved back to Houston, and he's one of the lead retinal surgeons here. Anyway, I gave him a call, and I kind of, you know, took a photo and asked the patient permission, of course, showed it to him. And, you know, then when I transferred the patient, I told the retinal surgeon in Lubbock. I sort of cheated. I called my retinal surgeon cousin. But you're right. Yeah, you need the resources to be competent. And I think when you show that competency and you bring things you need, staff, I mean, even if you don't know how to use the ultrasound, just pull it out. People will be like, wow, this guy really is, who is this guy? This guy, what is this equipment he has with him? And and I really do that everywhere, just to be prepared.
I'm waiting for a CAT scanner I can put in my suitcase. We're almost there. We're almost
call up Elon Musk to make a portable version.
Dr. Zhu, how about yourself?
I definitely echo what Andrew was saying. You know, I would probably, the only thing I would probably add would be for the liability piece when you're, especially if you're doing full-time locums, is to, when you're fielding all these jobs, right? Everyone is putting their best foot forward. You have so many people, you know, in the kitchen. You have the account manager, the client representative, your own locum rep, right? And you're, you know, these jobs, they're just all numbers and words on a screen. So how do you filter them? And so I received a tip that I continue to practice as I field jobs, was to actually get in contact with someone that actually worked there or had worked there. If you're lucky to have a previous locum practitioner that worked at that job or is still working there, giving them a call and actually discussing, hey, what is the job like? You know, what is the environment like? What are you expected or anticipated to do? That would help immensely, right? If you know, like I said, if the person wasn't there or you had someone that previously worked there, that would be best. In terms of the health insurance part, I think I wished, you know, in school we would have, you know, received a lot more business and medicine, learning how to run your own practice, and, you know, just learning, you know, all these different things going into it, because there's so much of business and medicine that, you know, we didn't know, you know, when we were in school, and now it's such a big part. Is you know, Rip, you were talking about, you know, health insurance, and when you're a 1099 as locums, for the most part, you know, you don't get health insurance. And I would probably encourage, you know, if you don't really have major pre-existing diseases or needing like a really strong health insurance, get a health insurance that actually has a health savings account, not a, you know, flexible, not the flexible one, but the health savings account. And the reason why is because it's triple tax advantaged. And I'm not a tax or legal person. Definitely consult, you know, your respective people. But, you know, if you look into it, having a health savings account and having it triple tax advantage would work to your advantage in the long run. So, and then, you know, the malpractice comes with every job. Definitely take a job that comes with its own malpractice. So.
That's such a good point. We did a talk a few months ago. I encourage everybody watching to take a look at it. It was all about tax. And if you have a high deductible health insurance plan, you can get an HSA with it. And like Dr. Zhu was saying, you get triple tax benefits from it. It's so completely useful for health issues and for down the road after a certain age to withdraw from. So certainly check that out. I was going to just quick field this quick question, which I guess they disappeared on, which we talked about already. Since we're running out of time a little bit, I want to edit this last question. I think it's a really good one. And it's really, and I think both of you guys touched up on it, and it's a great question I get asked a lot. How do you pursue things outside of your practice to make money? How do you jump into that? And was it nerve-wracking? I'll tell you what I do, and a lot of it's through working with Locumstory. They've been very gracious to let me write and do blog pieces, to do these talks. From these talks, I've done a lot of other talks. I don't really do social media. I don't have Twitter or Instagram or all that stuff, but I guess people saw something and then they reached out to me through our website and asked about Locum's model. And I think for me, being an independent physician and working for yourself and taking control of your practice. So that with writing, I also do a little rental property in this house I live in. We rent out a room on Airbnb, which is really fun. So I kind of do physician / B&B, and I actually really enjoy running a B&B. It's actually really fun having guests stay here. And then we do a little consulting on the side. As Dr. Wilner was saying, it's not, and I really like what you said, Dr. Wilner, it's not a lot of money, but it's important money. And I like that. And I like having other things to do outside, which are somewhat related to medicine, but sometimes not. And so that's been the extent of what I do. How about you guys? And I was going to say also our website, we generate sometimes ad revenue on our website, our practice site, about things like writing and being independent and how to pursue kind of a locums trajectory. Most of the things I did, I sort of liked writing. I got an opportunity to do it more, and I got to do it more and I liked it more. But most of the things I sort of fell into, I don't know, I've always liked doing Airbnb. And so when I bought a home, I thought it'd be a fun thing to add on to. But what about you, Dr. Wilner, and then Dr. Zhu, if you guys want to kind of chime in on how you guys got into your hobbies and interests and how you made money off of them.
Let me quickly return to Dr. Zhu was talking about, how do you discriminate? There's so many jobs available. One thing we haven't mentioned is having a relationship with an agent. I've worked with an agent now for over 10 years, and they know me and I know them, and they know what I'm looking for and what I want. And so if they come to me with a position, hey, Dr. Wilner, would you like to do this? Then they've already pre-screened it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to screen it too, but having someone, who is working on as part of a team, rather than going to a website, there are some websites, here's the job, send in your CV, and we'll match you. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but, having a human being that you have a relationship with is probably going to protect you for some catastrophes. In terms of non-clinical careers, I think one lesson that physicians probably should learn right away is that with very rare exceptions, working as a physician is going to compensate you more dollar for dollar, hour for hour than anything else you can do. So, monetizing your hobbies is fun, right? And but the likelihood that you're going to earn more from writing blogs for Locumstory than in the ER is small. So I think doctors need to figure out that doctors are actually in a pretty, may not feel that way, but doctors are actually in a pretty high income bracket. And cooking in a restaurant, you're still going to make more in the clinic, unless you happen to own 20 restaurants, then you've sort of escalated to another scale. And there are physicians who have succeeded, as entrepreneurs, in real estate or other areas, making far more than they made in clinical practice. But for your average physician who wants to continue working as a physician, but with something on the side, it's not likely that it's going to generate more than what they're already earning. But it's a trade-off because many people, including myself, feel quite energized by doing something different, that they have a passion for. And if it generates a little income, well, that's a bonus. Also allows you to set up your own 401k, and, it gives you kind of other business perks. For me, my passion has always been writing. And I started out writing fiction, poetry, short stories. Well, you never earn anything from that, unless you're John Grisham. And then I discovered that writing nonfiction, I could actually get paid for. In fact, I'll save a story for another time. But if you write something discreet, like I write for Medscape for over 20 years, and I do interviews and I write articles and opinion pieces, and you get paid per piece. Now, if I look at the hourly rate of how long it takes me to write that article, and versus what I would earn as a physician that day, it's probably about 20%, right, of what I would, but I like doing it. It's part of what I do and who I am. And if 20%, that's better than zero. So I think following your passion is the way to go. And don't sweat monetizing it. I think too much emphasis, I got to monetize my YouTube channel, and even if you do, so you'll make $100 a month, it's not going to really change things. You should do use that time, for your spirit and your soul. And I bet Dr. Zhu is going to agree with me. What do you think, Dr. Zhu?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, everyone here. I think it depends on where you are at in your career, right? So I'm on, I don't know where you are, Rip, but like for me, I'm on, just past the beginning phases of my professional career. And so it just depends, someone that's different in, the middle of the career, towards the end, whether they have a family or major obligation. And then, it's really about the passions and understanding, okay, what do I want to get from these passions? Do I want to just get the satisfaction or fulfillment from it? Or do I actually want to make money with it? Because having a pointed, goal of making money with the passions, it's entrepreneurial, right? Like you have to figure out all the other things that's maybe not as fun to, come with generating money from those passions, whatever it is, whether it's writing, speaking, things like that. And, you know, I have, you know, dabbled in, you know, all of them, speaking, writing, you know, being interviewed, you know, asking to write for publications and things like that. And, you know, you just, you know, in terms of the money making aspect, you just have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it adding value to me? Is it adding value to listeners, audience members, to my patients who, you know, I have a lot of patients that, you know, do know me, you know, outside of my clinical work. So it's really about asking yourself, you know, what am I supposed to get out of these at the end of the day? If it's just a pure hobby, hey, you know, go, you know, knock your heart out. And then, you know, it's just asking yourself, because it does take time, you know, to immerse yourself with these passions, right? So, yeah, it's just really, you know, asking yourself, quote unquote, what is that balance? How much time do I want to put into it? Because I know Dr. Wilner, you know, he's, you know, saying that he's doing this and doing that. And then at the end of the day, you have to kind of, you know, reflect and say like, okay, is this right for me at this current moment? You know, and it doesn't have to be like in the beginning of my career, you know, so gung ho with this. And then, you know, it's okay if it changes, you know, like, you know, the rest of life, everything evolves. So you have to kind of evolve and kind of pivot in terms of how do I, you know, do I want to spend more time here or less time here? So.
I really like, yeah, I really like what both of you guys said. I think what Dr. Wilner was saying, and I wish more physicians would understand, we're very blessed to make as much money as we do in this country if you compare salaries to the rest of the world. And, you know, I think, and I'm not going to go into a whole other tangent on physician and financial management here, which I could, but to understand we can get wealthy slowly. There's no need to rush to get, you know, wealthy or whatever you define wealth as. But I think what Dr. Zhu is saying, both of you, which is, I think, pursue your passion. Don't let money be the focus. And then if you get money from it, great. You know, we like having guests learning about our city, and then we get a little money off that. I like writing. If somebody reads it, great. If I do a talk, somebody listens, great. But it's also fun to talk about these kind of things and hope people will find an interest for it. So, well, wonderful, guys. I feel we could talk forever. This is such a great talk. I can't wait to check out both of y'all's websites and your podcast. Since Dr. Wilner and Dr. Zhu, thanks everybody for joining us today. If you guys have any further questions about locums, please check locumstory.com. Please, thank you for the panelists again for taking your time out from y'all's busy schedules to come join us. And somebody had asked very quickly about the Suitcase Manifesto. It's on the website, precisionem.com. And Dr. Wilner, of course, is a writer. You can see his writing, and Dr. Zhu has it. Dr. Zhu is at chefdoc.com.
Yeah, it's chefdoczhu.com, chefdoczhu.com. And then from there, you can find me everywhere else.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, thank you so much.
Thanks.